You are listening to the Digital Parent Podcast with your host, Ced Lewis.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Digital Parent Podcast. And on this show, we talk about one-to-one programs. Schools getting ready to start back all over the country. And some of your kids may be involved in a one-to-one program where the school system is providing the kids free laptops. And if you're a parent like me, you may be scared to death of your kids spending more time, more hours in front of a computer screen. So in order to help relieve some of those fears, I have my good friend, Heather Dowd, who is the author of the book, Classroom Management in the Digital Age, where she tackles one-to-one. She's a one-to-one teacher herself. She talks about how to structure the classroom and some of the biggest benefits your kids would get out of a one-to-one program. So I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Let's get right into it with Heather. Hey, Heather, welcome to the Digital Parent Podcast.
Hi, Ced. How are you doing?
Hey, we're so happy to have you on the show to talk about the great book called Classroom Management in the Digital Age. Heather, what caused you to, write this book? Is it because you had experience with classroom management, devices? What got you to the point of creating the book?
Well, first, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. And this book, so I have a co-author, Patrick Green, and we're colleagues at Singapore American School. And I've been a classroom teacher my whole career. And so, of course, as all brand new teachers know, when you get into the classroom management is a huge thing that you have to learn, those first couple of years of teaching. And in Singapore, I was a technology coach. So I moved from the classroom to supporting teachers using tech or doing tech integration into their curriculum. And we went one-to-one while I was in Singapore. And what Patrick and I discovered was that there was a common anxiety amongst all the teachers, new and veteran teachers, and that was around classroom management and how that would change with having the devices.
Heather, can you quickly for the audience explain what one-to-one means for people who may not know?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying. One-to-one means that every student has a device in the classroom. So it could be a laptop, it could be a tablet, it could even be an iPod or a phone. But a lot of schools right now are going one-to-one, so they're finding the funding in order to get devices. So it can look lots of different ways. Sometimes parents provide the device, and then sometimes the school provides the device. So when our school was going one-to-one, our middle school, so grades 6, 7, and 8, when we were going one-to-one for the first time, there was this anxiety amongst all the teachers around classroom management. And when we looked for resources, we found a lot of books on classroom management, but nothing specifically around technology. And so that is really why we wrote the book. We wanted to share what we learned in our school going one-to-one with a wider audience.
And Heather, I really appreciate you sending me a copy of the book. So for you guys who haven't purchased the book yet, especially for the teachers who listen to this podcast, I think it's an excellent beginning start, because basically you and Patrick really break down from point A to point Z how to manage classrooms, how to manage digital devices in classrooms, even how teachers should position themselves. Like, should you be in the front, the middle, or the back? So it's really told from a teacher's perspective of everything you need to know in regards to managing that classroom, even to creating like contracts and rules for the classroom around devices.
Yeah, that's a good summary. Thanks.
Now, one of the things that we hear a lot from teachers and some school counselors is their concern about bullying and sexting, because a lot of schools have policies where kids either have to, put their phones in their locker, or maybe it's a situation where they can't bring phones to school at all. So some schools feel like it's somewhat under control, but with a one-to-one program, there's this fear that you're going to open this world up where now kids have constant contact with the internet, and there may be more sexting, more cyberbullying take place in the school. Have you ran into that? And if you have, what were some of the interventions that you put in place to kind of prevent those things from happening?
Well, I think the biggest answer is education, digital citizenship education. And I think when a school is going one-to-one, it is so important that they make a strategic plan for how they are going to integrate digital citizenship into the whole program. And that's education for teachers, parents, and along with the students. One thing that we did at our school is that we planned a laptop boot camp. That's what we called it. And so the beginning of 6th grade, as the students are given their laptop for the first time, we had a 2-day boot camp that covered everything from, how to take care of the device, to how to use different programs on it to do creative things. But then we also included a really big digital citizenship component, and that included parents. So we had a parent piece where students had to teach their parents what they were learning in the boot camp, and we gave parents a contract for them to talk with their students about using the device at home. And in all of those things, there was a component of talking about bullying and what do you do when you see something happen online. And it is scary. And I think the default view that a lot of adults take is let's shut down the device, or let's take away access. And the reality is that students are going to get access to this one way or the other. And I think the healthy way to deal with it is to deal with it straight up front in school and at home, and teach students the proper way to behave with the devices, because at some point they're out of our control. They turn 18 and they leave, and right. We can't keep them in that playpen anymore. And so I think Patrick and I use the playpen example a lot when we do parent workshops. When kids are little, you create that playpen. There's a certain space that is safe for those students, and as they grow up, as the kids grow up, you kind of expand the edges of that playpen, right? That where it's appropriate. And when students get to middle school, that's when they start really pushing those boundaries, because that's what adolescence is about. And I think you can either lock them down and say you never get to use this tool, or you can say, here's this tool, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what the dangers are, and let's talk about the proper way to use it. And then another thing I'd like to share with you, with your audience about bullying at our school, our principal, and this is an anecdote, but he felt like in the 2 years after we implemented one-to-one and started really addressing bullying with digital citizenship lessons, he felt like the number of instances of online bullying went down in our school.
You know what? That's a question I wanted to ask you in the research. It really talks about that. Once kids start doing positive things with the internet, start doing positive things within the classroom, they really don't have as much time to bully or to engage in sex and things of that nature, because really the majority of the school day is being devoted towards the devices and doing online projects.
Yeah, and I think if teachers are designing engaging lessons with the devices, students are going to be engaged and they're going to be doing the positive things. And, I think along with the digital citizenship, teaching students the importance of having that positive digital footprint. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but this idea that we all have a digital footprint. When we Google our name, something's there. And, as young students, they have a chance to really, take control of that. And what do they want? How do they want to appear to the world? And, I think a majority of students want their school and their online world to be positive. And I've heard instances where, schools have created such a positive environment that when a negative thing does happen, the rest of the students stand up and say, no, that's not what our community does, and we won't have that. And that happened in our high school, a similar thing. There was a bullying instance, and the rest of the school came together and went to the administration and pushed the administration to do something about it. And they came up with this whole campaign, anti-bullying campaign because of it.
That's awesome. Now, one of the questions I have for you as a teacher, and, I've talked to other friends of mine who are teachers who work in one-to-one programs, is there a struggle to begin with in order to gain the attention of kids from their devices? Now you have, prior to one-to-one, you got kids in your classroom. You always have to gain their attention, but now you have a device in front of them. So how do you keep them from looking at their devices 24/7 opposed to actually looking at the instructor in front of the classroom?
This is always the challenge, isn't it? No,
Right.
You're right though. Even before devices, it was a challenge to get students' attention. I mean, when I was in school, we passed notes, right? But the device is a lot more appealing, and I get that. And so what we do when I do I do a lot of workshops with teachers around classroom management and tech integration, and and I try to model this when I'm doing workshops with teachers. I don't speak to the class unless all eyes are on me. So I never assume whether they're on a device or they're reading a book. If they're not looking at me, they're not listening. And so I think you set up a culture in your classroom of, right now is a time where your eyes are up front, and right now is a time where you're engaged in an activity on paper or on your device. And I think when you set up that culture, I tend to not have problems. And I've had as many as 100 11-year-olds with laptops, only me doing a lesson, and I've been able to, control that lesson. So I know it's possible. But I just demand their attention. And then the other way that, keeps students on task is make sure the task you're asking them to do is engaging and relevant to their learning.
Right.
That really is the number one classroom management tip, is create good, engaging, relevant lessons.
Yeah, another question I have is when it comes to communication between the school and the parents. Do you see one-to-one programs online for better communication with parents because you have the devices in the classroom? It's easier to maybe share homework assignments, share project assignments with parents?
I think as long as the teacher is connected, as soon as we became connected in terms of having email and internet, years ago, before any school was one-to-one, I think that I had better day-to-day communication with parents simply because of email, and being able to have a class presence, having a place where you post homework and what we did for the day. But I think the big change with one-to-one programs and every student having a device is now we have an opportunity to have better day-to-day communication between students and parents. I'll give you one example. One of the teachers that I work with, she teaches writing, and as a writing assignment every week, her students are required to write an email to their parents with links to some of their best work of the week, or reflecting on what they learned that week. And I think that it's so powerful because now those parents know what's happening in her classroom.
Right.
And it's coming from their child. They're much more likely to read that email coming from their child. And she's teaching students the appropriate way to write emails. So I think that's a really great example of, better communication between the classroom and parents.
And what about students who are suspended from school or kids who are truant from school? Do the one-to-one programs allow more accessibility to those students who complete assignments and not miss assignments and get poor grades?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. It does depend how the one-to-one program is set up. There are some where the devices stay at school. And so, there are the issue of connectivity at home. So I think it depends. But, most of the time students are able to take their devices home, and more, students have access to internet at home. And, learning is really anytime, anywhere now. And I think back to before one-to-one, I had a student who he had a chronic illness and he missed a lot of school. And this was, back when teachers were just beginning to have websites. And I had a website and I posted all of my homework on it. And he stayed more on top of what we were doing in the classroom than some of my students coming to class every day. And, he appreciated that. And now it's even easier with things like Google Classroom and just how easy it is to make a blog for teachers to communicate with their students. And, it kind of makes that question like, what did I miss while I was gone? And, that's no longer an acceptable question. And, now with, a lot of schools in the U.S. are moving to Google. I've had situations where the student is at home sick, but they're logged in to the same Google document the other students in the classroom are in during the school day, and they're
Right.
participating right there with everybody else in the Google Doc.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And I know, for example, there are a lot of state agencies that deal with like at-risk kids who may have been, kicked out of school. They're going to these one-to-one online programs, so those kids can still get the same education within their home in a more natural environment.
Yeah, I think it really provides a lot of different ways to learn, and I think that's good because more options is always better.
Now, one of the issues I have heard a lot with one-to-one programs, and these, I guess, are the one-to-one programs where the schools do not purchase the devices, the families have to purchase devices, is that, you have these issues where kids have different level of technology. You may have some kids with high-end laptops, and you may have kids with low-end laptops, and there may be compatibility issues and issues across the board with certain assignments. Have you seen that being a challenge with those types of one-on-one programs?
Yes, I have seen that as a challenge. I know of schools that when they very first went one-to-one, they did it that way. And the challenge, there were a lot of challenges, I think. One is the teacher doesn't necessarily know how to support every kid in the classroom because they all have a different device.
Right.
They might not all have access to the same kind of software to do a project, for example. I have heard this, though, being successful in a mature one-to-one program. So, for example, a program that rolled out where every student has the same device and the school gets used to that, and then they morph into something where now there's a bit more choice. Excuse me. So I've seen it work, but I've also seen the challenges. And however, I would say if a school does not have the resources to implement a one-to-one program where every student has the same device, I do think having access to the outside world with devices in whatever form is better than not at all. That I imagine others would argue with me on that, but that's my opinion. Yeah,
because I've seen that situation where a school starts out with their own devices. So, for example, everyone gets a Chromebook. Chromebooks are pretty cheap. If you buy them in bulk, I'm pretty sure that the school gets some type of discount. But if you have kids who are used to using MacBooks, they start complaining that the Chrome system is so much slower than what they used to at home. And then there's this argument with parents and kids, like, why can't we bring our own devices and, work on our projects a lot faster than using the school's device, which may be a little bit slower than what they're used to using?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think every school has to figure out what works for them in terms of that. And I think, every school community is different. And I think some schools could probably figure out a way to make that work. And others might have to say, look, no. I know what we did at our school is we said, this is your school device and this is the one that you bring to school and you don't bring anything else. But, that was a different situation. So, I think that to me, I think is up to the school leaders to kind of decide what works, and is it a problem if just a few of, kids who have access to a really nice MacBook get to bring theirs? Is that fair or not? And is that causing issues? And if it's not causing issues, then maybe it's fine. But if it's causing issues, then let's rethink it.
So let me ask you one more question in regards to teachers and adopting one-to-one. So if you have maybe more senior teachers, maybe a little bit older teachers that may not be as tech savvy, has there been kind of like a barrier for those teachers kind of adopting to the new way of teaching within the classroom?
I don't know that I would say it's always an age thing.
Sure.
I think, yes, there can be a barrier because it's a little bit scary and overwhelming when technology comes into the classroom and you yourself as the teacher is not comfortable with it. I've done a lot of workshops with teachers, and I'm often working with teachers who are in that situation. And what I try to tell them is that the number one skill or positive trait that they need to succeed is the right attitude. And, you do not need to know every single thing about that device in order to get kids engaged and working on it. You just have to be curious and let students explore and, know what the possibilities are. Like, for example, one of those things that is a little bit scary is making a digital video. And so maybe I don't know exactly how to make a video, but I know it's possible, and I know how to teach my students how to tell a story. So I can focus on the storytelling aspect, and then I can let students teach each other and teach me. That it's perfectly fine to get your students to teach you something about the device. And something that I always do as well is, especially when we're using a piece of technology that I don't know as well, but even if I do, I find out in my classroom who the experts are. And chances are you're going to have at least 5 hands go up. Who knows how to record something with the webcam on your Chromebook? And you're going to get 5 hands go up. And now those are my experts for that project. And, it empowers the students. They love to help.
Sure.
And then, and then I learn as a teacher, and I learn how that works. And so I think you have to have that lifelong learning attitude. I'm learning along with my students, and that's okay.
So, last question, Heather, where can teachers find you or find more information about, class management, and how maybe you can help them out, or maybe they can access the book to get more information if their school's getting ready to start these programs?
So we have a website for the book. The web address is cmdigitalage.com. So CM for classroom management, cmdigitalage.com. And we have a link for getting the book there. We also have some posters that you can download for free that we made for our one-to-one program that are there. And we have a link to the laptop boot camp that I mentioned, the one that we did with our school. So there's a link there so that teachers could have a look at that, schools can have a look at that. And I'm Heza, Heza, on Twitter, and I reply to people who write me. So we're on Twitter. We're using the hashtag CMDigitalAge to talk about the book. And we interact with people there and answer questions. And we're always happy to have conversations with teachers about this topic. It's something we feel strongly about.
And where can they find the book outside of the website? Can they find it on Amazon, Kindle, Apple Books?
It's on Amazon. So there's a Kindle version and a paper version. There's a link off the website. And there's also off of the website, there's a link for if a school wanted to purchase it in bulk, they would do so directly from the publisher. And there's a link on the website for that. But yes, it is on Amazon, and there's a Kindle version.
All right, great, Heather. I hope people go out and purchase the book. Like I said, I've read it, and it really goes from A to Z of everything you need to know to manage your classroom in the digital age. Thanks, Heather, for being on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sud, for having me. I appreciate it.
Hey, guys, I hope you really enjoyed that episode with Heather. And once again, if you want to know more information about one-to-one, make sure you go to her website, Dowd, it's HDOWD.com. You can learn about her workshops, her keynote speeches, and also Heather has links to her book, Class Management in the Digital Age. And also make sure you go to iTunes and rate the Digital Parent Podcast. Let us know what you thought about this episode with Heather. And you can also go to the show notes and get a direct link to our new course on Udemy about Twitter and how you can get a scholarship by really pimping out your Twitter profile. So I hope you check out all those links. Until the next time.